Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ungraded Life. So, we're about a month away from the most anticipated theatrical release of the summer, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And you know what fascinates me the most about this? It's not the star-laden cast or the images of Cyclops or Charybdis. It's Elon Musk criticizing Nolan's choice for Helen of Troy. And part of what fascinates me is that he even cares, right? I mean, think about it. Here's a man who runs companies that build rockets and artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, satellite networks, and somehow he has found the time to publicly complain about who is cast as Helen of Troy. Why? What's at stake? I can tell you this much. It isn't really about the movie. And it's really not about Homer or about Greek mythology. It's about something much bigger. It's about who gets to decide what things mean. And it's about something most people have probably never heard about, something called cultural hegemony. Antonio Gramsci is an Italian political theorist who argued that powerful people don't maintain power just through money, laws, police, or military force alone. They also want to shape culture. They want to influence what people accept as normal, what people think is beautiful, what people think is true. And if you take a moment to think about it, this doesn't sound like some off-the-wall conspiracy theory. It actually seems obvious. Remember J.D. Rockefeller's famous answer when asked about how much money was enough? He said, just a little more. And I think power works the same way. From a Marxist perspective, the ruling class already controls wealth, institutions, political influence. But that's not enough. They need a little bit more. Because no matter what you own or possess, there's always something you don't have or that you don't control. So this isn't about property. It's not about businesses. It's about owning meaning. Think about the most powerful person you've ever met. Or maybe if you don't know someone super powerful, a person you've heard about. A billionaire, CEO, a celebrity, a lifetime politician. These are people accustomed to altering reality through the force of their own will, right? They make decisions, they give directions, and people listen, and changes happen. But success creates a strong psychological risk because over time, the line between this is what I prefer and this is the way everything should be blurs, starts to disappear. Suddenly the logic starts getting diluted and guys like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, amongst others, start to think, well, wait a minute. If I can control markets, why not culture? If I can shape industries, why not public opinion? If I can manage companies, why shouldn't I also manage meaning? And here's where power becomes dangerous, not when it builds things, but when it stops recognizing boundaries. It stops recognizing spaces where it has no authority. Which brings us to Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. When I taught Homer to ninth graders, I'd ask them if they knew what The Odyssey was about. Most of them had no idea. Those who had a general grasp of the epic always provided a similar answer. It's about a guy trying to get home. Fair enough. That's the general plot. About a month later, after we read and analyzed the poem in all of its glory, they had some very different answers to write on their test. Now it's about a brilliant man discovering that cleverness isn't enough. It's about learning to master the many different versions of ourselves. It's a story about how our identity changes dramatically when we take journeys. It's about the distance between who we think we are and what our experiences reveal us to be. And here's what's nuts. The public conversation isn't about any of that. Instead, we're arguing about who should play Helen of Troy, this mythical figure whose father was, depending on the version you prefer, a swamp. In the Greek myth, Helen of Troy is the most alluring and beautiful woman in the world. So imagine the casting call for such a role. Since the 1970s, Hollywood has made a few attempts to bring Homer's world to our television screens, and the last three women to be cast as Helen of Troy were Diane Kruger, Sienna Guillory, and Irene Papas. For this summer's movie, Nolan selected Lupita Nyong'o. Now, this set off alarms for people like conservative podcaster Matt Walsh, who wrote on X to his 4 million followers, Not one person on the planet thinks that Lupita Nyong'o is the most beautiful woman in the world. And Musk would go on to support this comment and write several more of his own. And here's the thing. This isn't about Homer. It's not about preserving classical literature. Really, what this reveals is a much deeper problem at work. Greek mythology, like all other great art, contains symbolic territory. Within Homer's epic, we learn about beauty and identity and history and belonging, and whoever controls these symbols possesses a form of cultural power. So when a filmmaker makes a creative decision that challenges someone else's assumptions, it can feel, to powerful people, like a loss of control. Not because the story has changed, but because authority has changed. Someone else is deciding what matters. Someone else is interpreting the narrative. Someone else is defining the symbolism. And for people accustomed to getting whatever they want, this can feel threatening. That's why Gramsci's questions still matter. Who gets to define civilization? Who gets to define beauty? Who gets to define cultural identity? Who gets to define meaning? The strange thing is, this isn't anything new. Kings funded art, they funded religion, they funded history. There's a reason our history professors like to kick off the first lecture of each semester with the reminder that the ruling class has always tried to shape cultural memory. Today, we don't have kings sitting on thrones in this country, but we do have billionaires sitting in their privately owned media conglomerates. Different tools, same temptation. We've seen it throughout history. Someone accumulates massive amounts of wealth, influence, or status, and then that same someone thinks that because they've gobbled all of this other stuff up, they should also have the right to interpret reality for everyone else. And maybe that's the lesson. Not just from Gramsci, not just from Homer, but from life itself. Power can buy many things, but it can't buy meaning. Meaning belongs to all of us. And whenever someone tries to convince you otherwise, that's a moment to pause and to think a little bit deeper and to ask some important questions. Because just as cultural hegemony is nothing new, neither is our calling to resist it. I don't actually much care whether Elon Musk eventually colonizes Mars, but I sure as hell am not going to sit by as he or anyone else with his clout attempts to colonize meaning. Thanks for watching. Thanks for spending such finite resources as your time and attention with us. For more content from the Ungraded Life, you can follow, like, and subscribe on most social media platforms.